must be cautious.
Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Thank you once again for joining us here on Aggressive Negotiations, the Star Wars podcast that looks at things from a different point of view. I'm one of your hosts, Jedi Master John Mills, and joining me as we continue our journey of a rewatch of Bad Batch Season 2 as we hype ourselves up for Season 3 is Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matt, are you ready to return to Serenno for the second episode of Season 2, Ruins of War?
I'm very excited to be able to finish up this little duology that they kind of began the season with for Season 2. And it just feel like it's interesting how I think, this season really kind of set itself apart from Season 1. And the first, I think, 3 episodes do such a good job in the end of explaining where every single character that we followed in Season 1 is now in Season 2. And I think this second episode does that specifically, I think, for Omega. So I'm very excited to be able to talk through this episode because I think it's so key to what they're going to, of course, do this entire season.
And like Matt said, it does set itself apart. And you can set yourself apart by dropping off a star rating and review on Apple Podcasts for the show if you haven't yet. We'd appreciate it. If it's not the worst show you've ever heard, go on and give us a 5-star because that'd be great and swell and help get us into other people's feeds so that they too can share your love of Star Wars. And of course, we're on the social networks, the primary one being Twitter at the Jedi Masters and the network at Join Nerd Party. Matt, just to tee it up, we come out of a cliffhanger in Spoils of War, setting up Ruins of War. And where we're left hanging, did you have any expectation for where the show was going to start from? Like, how did you think we were going to tee up for the resolve? Obviously, we have the falling container. We have hijinks going on the planet, all of those sorts of things. Was there anything that you were particularly expecting to start as this arc continued?
I mean, I figured that we would, probably open the episode the way we do with, the falling container so that we could, get them to the ground, basically, however that was going to happen so that the rest of the episode could play out. Because, I figured we were going to escape Serenno by the end of the episode. And I think they did a good job of doing that. One, I think, again, by starting with the container and the way in which you have Omega, who's become such a key and integral part of this group. It's been her solution for this, to get on the container, knowing how it works, the fact that it's supposed to slow them down and all that. And I just thought the way in which we do all of this was kind of great. And it's interesting, too. I mean, the whole container part of the story, it has so many Last Crusade references, with it lands, but then the tank goes over, aka the container goes over. You have Omega dealing with the desire to get the treasure, and not wanting to let it go, and, being called to let it go. But then I think beyond that, there's the undercurrent as to why Omega is feeling like this. And she's feeling responsible for the predicament that the clones are in the first place. She feels like it as if it's her fault. And I love her dealing with those feelings because I think one of the things it does is, so many times with kid things, and kids in stories like this, it's almost like we forget they're kids.
Right.
And I think this season really remembers that Omega is so young. She's not even like Luke Skywalker or Leia age. And so she's still very young, and she's lived an incredibly sheltered life too. And so I really, really appreciate the fact that this episode I think does a great job of focusing on her and her journey of realizing that she's truly loved by these clones, and that in some ways, like is said in the episode, you saved us. We could possibly have just either be dead at this point if it wasn't for our connection with you, or who knows, maybe it would have been harder to resist the call of Order 66, without you there. So I think that all of that is just a long-winded way to say I think this episode just does such a great job following up the first episode, but I think specifically for where it just sets Omega as a character and kind of where her arc's going to go throughout the rest of the season.
Naturally, I agree. And I think when we were talking about season 1, we touched on that too, where like Omega is literally the same age as these clones. But she's getting an opportunity at having a childhood, which is something they never even had an opportunity at. Basically, like the key moment where their military training, as micro clones would have, we see the bank of young Jangos all lined up, and that's the childhood. Yep. And Omega didn't even get that one, that very, the structured training sort of childhood. She had an even more sheltered childhood. Yes. So she's getting, it's funny because her freedom to be individual and follow her own path is specifically because these clones are her father figures who are in and of themselves unique among clones because of their own abilities to be truly independent. Because, when you get back to it too, it's so wild that the whole selling point of clones, when the Kaminoans are talking to Obi-Wan, when they think he's there on behalf of Sifo Dyas, is clones can think creatively, which is something that battle droids can't do. And moments like this emphasize the fact that they bred living beings to think creatively, only to try to drive that out of them to force them to follow orders without question, which is exactly what droids do. So I think moments like this, Omega expressing legitimate human childhood, really, casts that into relief. I like the fact you call out the Last Crusade references too, because we had a Raiders reference at the beginning of the first episode. We have some Last Crusade in here, and we all know this is a rewatch. We know we're going to get more Indiana Jones references scattered throughout the season, which are going to be delightful in their own right. But joining the clones this time is the voice talent of Hector Elizondo as a Serenian native who acts as our sort of spirit guide that they encounter. What did you think of Elizondo's voice performance?
Oh, he's great. I think he just has such a wonderful voice. And, I think he was the perfect choice for a character like this, because in some ways he has such a distinctive voice the same way like Christopher Lee does. And so the idea that Serenians kind of have these distinctive voices is I think voice and accent are such an important part of Star Wars, when we kind of saw that the Twi'leks kind of have this French accent and things like that, so this, I think, really helped build the idea of the Serenians as a people. But I also just love him as a character for the way in which he reminds us that, Dooku is one Serenian, but there were many others who might not have supported him. And, it reminds you that in every country, regardless of the politics of that country, that doesn't mean that every single person in that country supports what that country stands for, right? And so I think it really brings that to light, I think, in a really good way. It's not banging you over the head with it, but also, the character does such a great job of bringing out that idea of teaching Omega what it means to be a child, which is just to have some fun with a toy. She has no understanding of the idea of toy, really, other than, we see her, she has the Tuca doll. Yeah. But other than that, like, the idea of something not being just for utility, but for enjoyment is something that she has a really hard time understanding. And I think to follow back up where we started, like, yeah, Hector Elizondo does such a great job of doing this. He's been doing this for a long time too with these type of roles. I think of him in the Princess Diaries back in the day, right? Where he's the loving person that kind of shows her what it means to be, this princess, but at the same time true to herself type of thing. And so, the character's fantastic, and the choice of him to play this character was I think inspired, really.
Just as a side note, my favorite memory of a performance from Hector Elizondo was I was in Las Vegas, and my friend I was with was like, oh, we're going to do all of these free things. So we went to a test screening for a show that ultimately never made it to air. But I remember the show was it was okay, but he was in it. And I remember like every scene with him in it, I was like, oh, A+. And then the rest of the show, I was like, it's a C. But I think also the character, and you call out how not every Serenian supported what Dooku was doing. I think that there are 2 points that attach that are really important. The first being, when you get into a war, the people are punished for what their leaders do, not what they necessarily believe, which is a terrible thing. That is one of the worst, most heartbreaking parts of a war, and the whole exercise of Bad Batch has been to illustrate how monstrously awful the Clone Wars were, because we understand it, especially in the context of the movies, of this master plan that Palpatine has set in motion, and we understand it on this intellectual level of, oh my gosh, look at this master stroke, he was playing both sides. But then Bad Batch has a moment like this where it drills really down to the idea that this guy's not even a pawn. He doesn't even get any say in what happens, and he gets punished for it.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, and this might seem weird to key in on, but because we're doing sort of that deep dive sort of thing, his speech where he talks about how Dooku was basically, it was more, and we'll probably have to bleep me, he was more Count Egg. Like, yeah. He talks about how leaders do these things to enrich themselves and for their own prestige and their own power, and it's not for the good of the people, sort of thing. And I see that meme. It looks like a painting of when Carl Weathers, rest in peace, and Arnold Schwarzenegger do that grasp in Predator, and you have the two sides and then the thing in the middle that they actually agree on, and like. This guy in that moment gives a speech where it's like you can label one of them left, one of them right, and then in the center, our leaders suck. Yeah. And it's like, that's always where everybody's going to come together. And so it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, it's exactly what Star Wars is supposed to be, which is a character or a situation giving us a universal thing that both sides can walk away with and say, okay, well, how would we resolve that then? How can we get past that so it doesn't happen?
Yeah, no, I think that's a excellent point as to especially what this character does, just in terms of the Star Wars storytelling, and I think the depth that we're getting in a show like this, I think is fantastic. Character wise too, I was thinking of that it's Echo who reminds Omega of what she's done for them as the clones, and so. When we're thinking of what's coming in the future here, it makes so much more sense that, she is comforted by Echo in his words here. He's one of the people, I think, who's slightly more in tune with her emotional state, when you think of what Echo's gone through too, right? And what this group means to him. And so I think in some ways he can really help her to understand her place with them the same way they've helped him understand his place with them. And so I think that really leads to then against, we're setting the foundation for the things we're going to be building on throughout the entire season. And so, and I would say too, on the other side of this, just watching Hunter and Wrecker work together was so fun because, of course, they're the complete opposites of one another. But man, watching them work together and escape. And, I think what makes them such fun characters to watch together is the fact that, yes, they are complete opposites. And yet they understand one another's strengths so well that they can work as one, basically, and they trust one another. Like when Hunter doesn't understand what Wrecker's trying to build, he just trusts that Wrecker knows what he's doing. He knows his job. And, that part of this episode is just so much fun. And I know we both love both of those characters, but, it's kind of that thing where when you have an ensemble show and you start putting characters together that don't spend as much time together, this just is like the Odd Couple here in some ways and it works out just so perfectly.
No, I'm glad you say Odd Couple because it also gives an opportunity for something we've also praised about the show in the first season and then also in the most recent episode is organic comedy. Mm-hmm. You can have, and I know everybody's going to cringe, so you know what? I'll take a swipe at both. You can have some of the overboard stuff that Jar Jar did, doesn't land well. You can have a call for General Hugs coming in at the beginning of The Last Jedi, doesn't land well. But when you put Hunter and Wrecker together, the mere virtue of their personalities not intertwining, you have natural comedy. And it's actual comedy because you're laughing at something that is very relatable. Two different people trying to find the same solution, hijinks ensue, but you're rooting for both of them. You want them both to win, obviously. On a even more lizard brain level than I'm a Star Wars fan and these are the heroes and I'm cheering for them, it's you enjoy the interaction. The thing that will always stick out with this episode, though, and this is something I think that Bad Batch gets really good at doing in season 2, is the tiny moments at the end. And specifically, the one I'm building up to. When Rampart decides he has to execute somebody because they won't toe the party line. What you have is, despite this speech about how terrible Dooku was, about the state of Republic and Separatist, about the clones working together, overcoming our differences, all of this sorts of thing, the fog of war, who gets punished, you have this little moment demonstrating the Empire's even worse than any of that. And I think that it's very necessary to point out, specifically because this is a lot like where Anakin has to have certain atrocities attached to him because Vader had become an anti-hero. And people were cheering for him to become Vader. And you know that one of the things I've always loved about episode 3 is Lucas recognized that and said, no, okay, well, we're going to take care of that cheering for Vader part here. He's actually a monster. Let's remind everybody. But reminding everybody of the intrinsically awful, awful side of the Empire.
Right.
Which has given us other villains to cheer for, like Thrawn, or people to relish their evil, like Tarkin, who's like the old serial villain. Rampart's act actually makes the Empire horrifying because you suddenly realize how evil it is and how it's different than anything. Like Palpatine goes from somebody where you're like, oh, hey, he's a mustache-twirling villain to, oh, this is the galaxy under his rule. Oh, now I know why we need Luke Skywalker to come along.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think what it also shows is the way in which, we thought things were bad during the Clone Wars, and you thought people were being selfish then. But Palpatine has unleashed this ability for people in his organization to be utterly selfish, to be working all for their own little fiefdoms, and they're playing their own little games in ways that truly, begin to ruin people's lives in ways that we didn't even think possible, right? And we know Tarkin did that. We know Krennic did that. It's one of the beauties of Rogue One is the way it builds that character. And, Rampart's another character like that, right? Where you're seeing that work its way through the Empire so early. And, what's great about this with little scene with Rampart, of course, we know where this is going to go because this is a rewatch, and we know what's going to happen to his character. And it's like we know how Palpatine is then going to use that for his benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And so the beauty of this is that there's games within games within games being played. And the base level game here is these bureaucrats and these these new military leaders in the Empire. They all begin to think they have their own little, fiefdoms to be able to do basically what they want in and get themselves higher up the food chain. But what they don't realize is they're just playing a game that Palpatine wants them to be playing so that he can use them and any mistake they make as being able to point to corruption or, make himself the savior. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm just really glad that you pulled that out because it is one of those moments there at the end. We're so used to the series kind of ending with wonderful little moments between our hero characters. But this is the season where a lot of the episodes end with terrible moments, either for the hero characters or for things going on in the background. And it's like, this is where I think this season truly is becoming and is the Empire Strikes Back season for these characters. And so it's good stuff. And already in this, wrap up of the duology for the opening of the season, it ends on such an ominous note. And I think it's differentiating itself from the first season and letting us know we thought things were kind of bad, but they're way worse than we thought.
Yes, they are. And I think that one of the great opportunities is that it's world building through character moments, which is really the best way to do world building. And when you have a series, you have the opportunity to do that. And I would say that as much praise as I've had for some other efforts, an episode like this and just that little moment at the end illustrates the fact that Bad Batch is legitimately a template that other shows should be looking at for how to handle story and world building through character. And I wish that some of the other shows we've gotten would go back and, yes, I know the whole history of animation, but because we're talking about Bad Batch, it's happening right in front of you right now, everybody. Pay attention to what these people are doing over here because they're doing it right. And hold that up as your template for how to approach certain things.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the beauty of the way in which this show is done. I mean, you can go from fun to silly to light to airy to dark to gritty to terrifying, and all in under 20 minutes in one episode. And I think that's the thing here. But again, it's these first two episodes together, I think, really are setting the stage for something pretty ominous. And that's what I love about, this opening for season 2.
Yeah. Well, this is the opening for season 2, and we know we're going to some really interesting places throughout season 2. So I'd say we both give this arc, Spoils and Ruins of War, these 2 episodes, high marks as it tees up what we're about to go into. But before we get there, Master Rushing, where can people find you out there in the wilds of the internet?
Well, just search any of the social media platforms for Matt Rushing 02. If I'm there, you'll find me. I would love to interact with you. You can also, of course, find me here outside Aggressive Negotiations with Owl Post, talking about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time with Dre Kaufman. And then you'll find me over on the TFM network with a bunch of shows. The 602 Club is a great place to hang out, where you'll have myself and many others talking about all of the different franchises and fandoms that we love. You'll also find me doing Literary Treks, The Orb, Warp 5, The Artificial Tango, and Saddle Up. But John, if people wanted to see, what else you've got going on, or what latest Bad Batch shirt you might be wearing that day, where can they find you?
Well, gosh, I wish I was wearing a Bad Batch shirt every day. during this rewatch. But alas, you can find me on the wilds of the internet as Kessel Junkie. And you can find me right here on the network co-hosting a show called House Lights, where we look at the work of directors and obviously their movies. And we have a lot of fun with it. A couple of yucks along the way. But Master Rushing, I think that we have successfully returned from our mission exploring Serenno. And it's time now to turn our attention toward a Bad Batch character we haven't seen yet. So I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.